There's a new preprint out now about how tools like ChatGPT may be affecting human cognition. It comes courtesy of MIT Media Lab. It's titled Your Brain on ChatGPT, Accumulation of Cognitive Debt When Using an AI Assistant for Essay Writing Tasks. As I mention every time I talk about a preprint, I'd like to remind you to always take these kind of results with a grain of salt because it has yet to go through formal peer review. In this relatively small study, researchers asked 54 subjects to write essays using either ChatGPT, Google search, or nothing but their own brains. They gave each of them EEGs while they worked, and they found that the group that used ChatGPT consistently underperformed at neuro-linguistic and behavioral levels. That's obviously not shocking, right? The whole point of ChatGPT is to save yourself some brain energy. But the actually interesting part of this research is that the researchers went on to give those subjects more essay writing tasks over the next few months. And what they found was that the group that was using ChatGPT got lazier and lazier until their final essays were just copied and pasted from the results of a single prompt. In one final section, the researchers asked the ChatGPT group to go back and rewrite one of their previous essays without using ChatGPT. The subjects hardly remembered their original work and showed lower brain activity, possibly because they weren't accessing deep memory. The group that didn't have any tools to write at all initially were also asked to rewrite an essay, but they were now allowed to use ChatGPT to do it. The researchers found that those subjects' brains still fired on all cylinders and produced good essays, giving hope that there might be a decent use case for tools like ChatGPT. The paper has been submitted to a journal, and so I was going to hold off on discussing it until it passed peer review. But the other day, I happened to see a post on the r/skeptic subreddit linking to a newsletter from someone criticizing it, a computer programmer named Greg Fish. In that post, he actually mischaracterizes the study pretty badly, failing to mention the researchers' findings that the ChatGPT group is the only one that actually got worse over the course of the study. It's not just that they showed less brain activity, it's that they got lazier and lazier and had no ability to even remember what they had written previously. That's significant because in school, the point of having someone write an essay, it's often, to get them to think deeply about a certain topic, maybe practice their research abilities, and to come away with a better understanding of that topic and how to convey an idea. Fish also badly maligns Archive, the site where the preprint was published, writing that the whole thing took a strange turn when the lead investigator, Natalia Kosmina, decided to publish it directly to the Archive preprint repository and publicize her findings before a formal peer review process because she found them so startling and alarming, which is often a red flag in academia. I say that because academics usually tend to do this if their paper either seems likely to be rejected or makes serious leaps to conclusions they're not sure will be given a pass by the reviewers. That is simply 100% not true. Yes, Kosmina told the press that this was her first time publishing a preprint on Archive, but the site hosts nearly 3 million papers and is a critical tool for researchers around the world. University of California, the Department of Energy, Oxford, Harvard, and MIT are just a few of the hundreds of institutions that regularly submit papers to Archive. There's even a common phrase amongst physicists: if it's not on Archive, it doesn't exist. It is absolutely in no way a red flag to publish a preprint there or anywhere else, and it is absolutely not done because academics think their papers will be rejected by peer-reviewed journals. Publishing a preprint is a great way to get immediate feedback from peers to refine a paper and make sure it's been properly represented. And allowing anyone and everyone to access these preprints gives important data to researchers who otherwise might not be able to afford to get the data from peer-reviewed journals. And during a rapidly escalating situation like the COVID pandemic, Servers like Archive were crucial to allow research to get to other researchers as quickly as possible so we could do things like, develop vaccines. It's like the backbone for our field, CERN's Alex Coles told Scientific American. It's not only a tool for physicists and computer scientists, it has had an impact on the overall scholarly communication process. For instance, Archive inspired preprint servers in the life sciences, such as bioRxiv and medRxiv, have proved invaluable for speeding up biomedical research during the coronavirus pandemic. So yeah, please don't take that newsletter seriously or share it with anyone who might end up with the exact wrong idea about Archive or preprints or this particular study. But I bring it up in part because I actually agree with the rest of that newsletter on a broader point, which I actually just discussed last month when a good friend of mine asked me what I thought about AI chatbots potentially making kids dumber. She was referring to a series of articles that had recently been published, starting with New York Magazine's piece by James D. Walsh titled "Everyone is Cheating Their Way Through College. ChatGPT has unraveled the entire academic project." That essay detailed the experiences of dozens of students in various colleges who were using the chatbot to write all of their essays for them and essentially offloading all of that silly thinking business. Walsh cited some ethicists, one of whom said that massive numbers of students are going to emerge from university with degrees and into the workforce who are essentially illiterate, both in the literal sense and in the sense of being historically illiterate and having no knowledge of their own culture, much less anyone else's. Another ethicist agreed, stating, "We're talking about an entire generation of learning, perhaps significantly undermined here. It's short-circuiting the learning process, and it's happening fast." A week later, Jason Keebler at 404 Media reported that he had already filed dozens of public record requests with schools and state departments of education to better understand how they were dealing with this apparent ChatGPT problem, with his conclusion being that, well, they weren't. If they took any action at all, it was to bring in consultants who were pro-AI to give presentations that largely encouraged teachers to use generative AI in their classrooms. Each of these presentations noted potential challenges with the technology, but none of them anticipated anything as extreme as what is described in the New York Magazine article, or as troublesome as what I have heard anecdotally from my friends who are teachers, who say that some students rely almost entirely on ChatGPT to make it through school. Finally, Keebler followed that piece up a short time later with this other story about teachers who had contacted him describing their experiences dealing with chatbots in the classroom, with his conclusion being that teachers are not okay. Respondents detailed their frustration with needing to come up with new techniques for teaching and grading and catching cheaters, many of which don't even feel like or know that they are cheating. And thus, my friend in this discussion asked me if I thought that this was shaping up to be some kind of existential threat of sorts, considering that I've been pretty critical in the past of how large language models like ChatGPT make the world a worse place in a lot of other ways, like sucking up a bunch of energy and spreading misinformation and creating cult leaders. But I had yet to comment in detail on whether or not I thought it was bad for kids, because at that time, there wasn't a lot of data on how chatbots affect kids. And I've always been skeptical of claims that new tools, new forms of technology or media will naturally lead to some kind of downfall of society. As many people know, according to Plato, Socrates felt that the written word was destroying people's minds, something we only know about because Plato wrote it down. My friend pointed out in this discussion that in a way, Socrates was correct. Writing things down did allow humans to offload a part of their thinking that was previously occupied with remembering everything. And so over time, humans are worse at remembering things. But in that case, it was likely overall beneficial. We now have a better and more factual record of history, and we have more cognitive energy to perform higher level tasks. The same can be said about cell phones. When I was a kid, I had at least a dozen phone numbers memorized. My parents' line, my brother's line, my grandmom's, a few friends. Today, I have one number memorized, my parents, because they're boomers who never gave up their landline. I have to ask my own husband what his cell phone number is whenever I fill out emergency contact forms. My brain no longer recalls a dozen 10-digit numbers, but overall, that's perfectly fine because my cell phone does it for me. There's a slight problem in that if I'm ever in an emergency without my phone, I should probably commit my husband's phone number to memory. But for the most part, it's like, who cares? I don't need to be doing that with my brain. The debate over how technology affects cognition, this sort of push and pull, has only heightened in recent decades. In 2011, Nicholas Carr published The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains, arguing that neurological research showed online reading was lowering our cognition and making it more difficult for people to engage in deep reading of things like literature. I mean, I think that's what his book was about. I never actually got around to reading it. I did try to read his earlier 4,000-word Atlantic article that inspired the book, but I ran out of time. So instead, I hit up the Wikipedia page for the book, which is only 106 words. But before I finished it, I got bored and noticed that there's a song about it by a band called I Like Trains. So I went to listen to that. And I'm sorry, but the song is 41 minutes long. Jesus Christ. Okay, jokes aside, the Wikipedia page about his Atlantic article actually is quite good and extensive. It provides a good overview of Carr's position as well as the corresponding pushback, with some arguing that Carr is being overly deterministic by suggesting that the internet is literally atrophying our brains as opposed to, if anything, just tempting us with consuming information in a way that is easier but also shallower, meaning that each individual can ultimately just decide for themselves if they'd like to continue putting in that effort to read deeply. To refer back to my earlier point, I don't actually think I've literally lost the ability to remember a dozen phone numbers. I just think I don't feel the need to memorize any of them. You know, if I make a good decision and sit down and try to remember my husband's phone number, I'm fairly certain I can do it. I just need to make the decision to do it. So yeah, as I've mentioned in many previous videos, there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that humans are literally evolving to have smaller or less capable brains. We're just choosing to use them in different ways, which can be good or it can be bad. We may look back and think, oh, Socrates was being pretty silly with all that whining about the written word, but that doesn't mean that all technological advances are necessarily neutral or beneficial for us as a society. Like, it's fair to say that the internet has had some unintended negative consequences, or at least has contributed to some negative consequences. As I mentioned in my video about people using ChatGPT to experience a spiritual awakening, yeah, people have always had psychotic episodes. People have always used religion and spirituality to manipulate others. People have always used new technology to try to find God. But now, instead of needing to go outside and actually find people to bilk, a burgeoning cult leader can just reach into his pocket and use social media. And instead of making up his own nonsensical doctrines, he can just ask ChatGPT to tell the masses that he's the second coming of Pazuzu or whatever. It's much easier now, and that's not good. In my discussion with my friend, that was her ultimate worry, that ChatGPT and its ilk aren't necessarily comparable to the written word supplanting the oral tradition. Because instead of replacing rote memorization, ChatGPT is replacing thinking and learning in general. It's replacing critical analysis and the active finding and sorting of information, and that is in fact bad. I thought she made a great point there, but her point highlighted a concern that I've had for a very long time now, that while chatbots are doing that, they are replacing critical thinking, they're only doing it because we as a society have devalued critical thinking for decades. And I myself, I think, am a pretty good example of this. I was a gifted kid. Before my elementary school established a gifted and talented program, I had already started school a year early. I read books assigned to the next class up, and I would need to go to the grade up to take certain math and science classes. And I don't say this to brag. Kids all learn at different rates, and I had the benefit of a stable family where I learned to read early and often. And what the entire experience of elementary school taught me was that things should come easily to me. And if I had to work at anything, it meant that I was dumb and a failure. And that left me very cynical going forward, and that I refused to really push myself. I knew what I was good at, like passing tests, and I used that to help me get good grades in advanced and AP courses despite never, and I mean never, doing the homework. And when it came time to figure out what I wanted to do in college, I decided that since I was a good writer who enjoyed writing, I would go to college to become a copywriter. Why not a novelist? Because I had read an autobiography of a copywriter in the 1960s who made tons of money doing copywriting and had so much fun. And in his spare time, he went and wrote a book. And so at the time, I thought that that was a pragmatic decision. I would go to the best advertising school in the country. I'd work around the clock to graduate early, so I'd pay less in tuition. I'd get into the workplace faster. I'd have a good degree to show to get a good job and make a bunch of money and have a good life. In retrospect, what I thought of as pragmatic was really cynicism. I didn't actually go into college to learn anything. I went in to do what I knew I did best: pass tests, get the good grades, get the diploma, get the hell out as quickly as possible. But when I got to college, I actually became enamored again with learning. I paid my tuition by working full-time at a magic shop where I was introduced to James Randi, and through him to the works of Carl Sagan and Martin Gardner. And I reflected that back by wandering off the syllabus and picking weird and interesting classes that had nothing to do with advertising, like Greek literature and the origins of Homo sapiens and structures of the brain as it relates to psychology and the history of heresy and the writers of the Harlem Renaissance. And I remembered that before I got obsessed with already being or pretending to be the smartest kid in class, I really loved to learn. And learning requires that you first be ignorant, that you ask questions, that you embarrass yourself sometimes, that you actually put in effort to solve a problem. And that, you even try to remember something, because remembering something is the first step to even being able to know how to use a tool like Google to find the thing you want to learn next. I got lucky because even back then in the 90s and 2000s, the American education system had already morphed into a system that valued cynicism in a student who wanted to succeed. What mattered was scoring high on that test to get into that specific expensive school that would give me that piece of paper, that would give me that job, that would give me health care and a good salary so that I could live a good life. Of course, now we have a tool to exploit that even further. And of course, students are using it because their education isn't about being educated anymore. And of course, people in the workforce are using it because their jobs are meaningless. Doing the job is not beneficial to them. Having done the job and getting paid is the only good result. Sorry, I know I got a little long-winded and personal there. I was really vibing because remember back when I made that joke about that 42-minute long song, The Shallows? Well, at this point in writing the script, I was almost finished it. I was just super into it. It turns out it's really good. Anyway, the point is that, ChatGPT probably is bad for people because it is replacing learning and critical thought and some important aspects of memory. But it's exacerbating a problem that was already there. We as a culture no longer value learning for the sake of learning. If we could snap our fingers and disappear chatbots tomorrow, that glaring problem would still be there. The only solution, the only real way to solve this problem, that's right, fully automated gay luxury space communism. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.